So we're going to start the day with review. Use factoring and the zero product property to find the x-intercepts of x squared plus 8x plus 12. So as a reminder, you're going to be doing the rectangle and diamond problem. We're putting in the x squared and the 12. You multiply those together, you get 12x squared. And then the other piece, the 8x, goes in the bottom of your diamond problem. And you're asking yourself what two numbers multiply to 12 and add to 8. When you get those, you can put them into a rectangle, find the outside lengths of the rectangle, write your answer in parentheses, and then get your final what does x equal, as if you were trying to solve when it's equal to 0 to find x-intercepts. So that's the one you're doing on your own. My example is down here. If we try factoring x squared minus 6x minus 1, we put in the x squared and the minus 1. We do the diamond problem. If we multiply x squared and minus 1, we get negative 1 x squared. And then our extra piece is the minus 6x. And we're looking for what numbers multiply to 1 but add to 6. The only things that multiply to 1 are positive 1 and negative 1, and there's no way those can add to 6. This is not factorable. It has no way to be factored. So does that mean that this graph has no solution or no x-intercepts? The answer is no. Just because it can't be factored doesn't mean that the graph doesn't exist or there's no x-intercepts. This graph still has x-intercepts. They're just going to be at decimals, not at whole numbers. So we have to find those differently. We need a new strategy besides factoring. Our new strategy is called the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula will solve every single equation, whether it's factorable or not. So you could technically use quadratic formula the rest of your life and never factor again, but factoring is a lot faster. Quadratic formula is a little scary. Just believe me that with practice you will understand it. So step number 1, make sure that your equation says that it's equal to 0. That's the first step. And then we can look at the equation and pick out what numbers are the a, b, and c. Notice that the a is the number that comes in front of the x squared, the b is the number in front of the x, and the c is the number that's alone. So that's kind of our process. Here is the scary quadratic formula. You're going to write it in your box just along with me. So the formula is x equals opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over a fraction of 2a. Looks terrifying. It's not that bad. There's even a shortcut to memorize it if you'd like to memorize it, but this is an open notes test, so you could always look at the formula during your tests and assignments. But there's a little song. It's just like Pop Goes the Weasel. I'll sing it once and be really embarrassed, and then maybe it'll help you remember it. So the song goes like this. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's look at how we use this. Here's our example. X squared minus 3x minus 7. So the a is the number that's in front of the x squared. This does not have a number in front of x squared, so that's implied that it's a 1. So we'll say, oh, the a is 1. And we can even write a 1 in there. The b is the number in front of the x, so in this case the b is negative 3. And the c is the number that's all by itself, and in this case the c is negative 7. So now we go to that quadratic formula and we put the numbers in replacement of the letters. So x equals negative b. So negative, and our b was negative 3. So negative, negative 3. What happens to a negative negative? It's really just a positive. And then we have plus or minus. We'll talk about what that means later. Square root b, so negative 3 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 7. all over 2a, which was 1. If you can plug in the numbers to the formula, that's a great start. The rest of what we need to do is a calculation. We're going to start with the numbers underneath the square root. So we're going to start here. The 3 squared and the minus 4 times 1 times 7. We're going to rewrite what we had in our quadratic formula. X equaled 3 plus or minus square root of something all over, and 2 times 1 is 2. So that part under the square root, negative 3 squared makes positive 9, and then negative 4 times 1 times negative 7 is positive 28. So I have to put a plus 28. And my next step is to add those two yellow numbers together. 9 plus 28 is 37. So we're going to have x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 37, all divided by 2. Now here's what we do next. We use this weird plus and minus. What that does is it lets us get two separate answers for x, just like factoring would, two different x-intercepts. So we're going to split this problem apart and solve it twice. Once when we do 3 plus the square root of 37, and then divide by 2, and once when we do 3 minus the square root of 37, and then divide by 2. So I go to my calculator. Here's kind of my work so far. I'm typing in my calculator 3 plus the square root of 37, which is 9.08, and then we divide by 2. So I get an answer of 4.54 as an x-intercept. And then my second one, I do 3 minus the square root of 37, which is negative 3.08, and then divide by 2. And I get negative 1.54. So I used my quadratic formula and I got two decimal random x-intercept or x solutions. I will do one more with you, and you just have to try one by yourself as the homework. So in this equation, I'll rewrite the quadratic formula so we have it to look at. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we have to find our a, b, and c numbers. A is in front of the x squared. B is in front of the x. C is alone. So A is 3. B is 7. And C is 2. Now we fill those into our formula. X equals negative, put in the b, 7 plus or minus the square root, b squared, so 7 squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2, and the a is a 3. Next step, start underneath the square root. Calculate the 7 squared, and then calculate the minus 4 times 3 times 2. Keep everything else the same and just rewrite it. It's safer to rewrite over and over again than to try to do steps in your head. Negative 7 plus or minus square root. Alright, 7 squared is 49. 4 times 3 times 2 would be minus 24. And on the bottom, 2 times 3 is 6. Then in my calculator, I'm going to actually calculate 49 minus 24. And that is 25. So we do x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 25 all over 6. And then we break this apart and we solve it twice. Once with the positive and once with the negative. So we're going to do negative 7 plus the square root of 25, then divide by 6. Or negative 7 minus 25, then divide by 6. So negative 7 plus the square root of 25 is negative 2, and then divide by 6, and that's negative 0.33, or a third. And then negative 7 minus, I missed that square root symbol, square root of 25, which is negative 12, then divide by 6, and it is negative 2. So these two numbers would be our solutions for when our quadratic is equal to 0, when we solved for x, or where our x-intercepts would be on the graph. You have to try one more quadratic formula by yourself, solving here, and don't forget to do the factoring problem at the first page.